Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, here to Coach 'em Up. I believe we are to episode 8. I'm with my friend Ed Chapman. I'm Travis Turner, and our coaching resource continues here. And Ed, as you know, we've searched out classic song titles to kind of tie together what we do, which by the way is actually turning out to be a little harder than I anticipated. I'm going to have to pick my songs and then just come up with random topics. It made me nothing, to make it all fit together. But for the first time, we're going to the Beatles. Revolution is our song title, and it's not a perfect marriage, but just the whole out of the gate, the hook. You say you want a revolution. I'm going to put this on us in sports, in parenting in sports, but certainly our deal is coaching and coaching. And creativity, innovation, the ability to break the mold. I think it's always been there. I'm not sure that it's easy to hang on to anymore because there's so much awareness of everything that's going on. There's so many pressures. There's so much judgment to the things that we might do. And I suppose after a while, there is nothing new under the sun, maybe, but you've experienced this having been a parent and a coach in an era where travel basketball, travel baseball took over, and that became the norm. And I think sometimes people feel like they're very much put in a box. And if I don't do this for my kid, I'm shortchanging them. I'm hurting their development somehow. You've seen it in coaching where you're trying to do things as a coach in terms of playing basketball a certain way that goes against norms, and it's a little bit radical. And if it fails, if it blows up, people say, "What in the world were you doing? That's nuts." And there's just that thing, I think about I can hear John Smoltz in the World Series railing about the refusal of modern organizations to let a guy work past 100 pitches. Of course, you know how offensive that is to Smoltzy. Back in his day, 30 plus years ago, he was going to take the ball all night. In fact, he got out pitched one night by a guy who went 10 innings and Jack Morris. And I get where Smoltz is coming from because it became the thing where we're going to put these pitch counts in place. One organization did it, and then the innovation turned into the norm that nobody will break. So maybe that's what happens. But our topic is revolution, it's innovation, it's doing things differently. First thoughts out of your head, out of your mind when we bring this subject up.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is I really do believe there is nothing new under the sun. I mean, in the world of sports, it it goes back to one of the things I think we said in episode 1 is it's not so much what you do, it's what you emphasize. Or maybe it wasn't episode 1, but our analytics, it's what you emphasize, right? And so there are certain ways to get it from point A to point B in accomplishing what you're doing. Somebody somewhere has done a version of it somewhere, but the point is, what do you emphasize? And then do you have in place the building blocks that get you from that starting point to that ending point? It's one thing to say, well, we're going to do this. Okay, well, this is what it's going to look like as an end product. But what are all the steps in the process to make sure that it happens? It doesn't just happen because you say we're going to do this or you want to do this. You have to have the boring, basic, fundamental elements that lead you toward that. And thus it really has become then an emphasis on what we are doing or the process by which we are going about it. And and then that ties into the idea and the understanding that we're trying to continue to learn after all these years is that you can't really just chase end results. You have to chase the little steps in the process along the way that make it possible. And from there, I don't, it's never really revolutionary other than it just is it is a newer or a greater emphasis on certain things, perhaps, that were always there, but they had fallen out of, they had fallen out of favor or not as commonly emphasized. But you find that there's more than one way to accomplish the end goal and to get there. And so, that's what I think of in terms of revolution, is just simply having a broader view, backing up and saying, okay, this is where we are. This is where we'd like to go. We don't all have to travel the same road, because it won't make sense for all of us to try to travel the exact same road to get there. We're not all the same, and all of our starting points are not the same. And so, those are the ways that I try to think about it now, in a less concrete manner and a little bit more abstract, and a willingness to back up and say, hey, we've never really emphasized it like that before, but that's worth looking at.
I'm going to make you the director of revolution for a moment. Okay.
Okay.
Now, recognizing and acknowledging that you feel strongly, and I do too, that one size fits all is imperfect. Again, we're talking about different individuals, we're talking about different scenarios, contexts, and circumstances that they can be so different in so many areas. But just the general concept of player development. I've got a group of 10-year-old ball players, baseball, basketball, whatever. What do you see, whether it's revolutionary or not? Maybe, as you say, it's bringing back emphasis from a past era. What would be most important in your mind in changing the way things are now to better develop young players?
Well, I don't care what particular avenue of athletics that you're pursuing. Um, you want to establish the fundamental building blocks, those core essentials that are going to be necessary, regardless of what their physical traits eventually allow them to do. Um, a greater emphasis on those fundamentals while developing a love for the game, the love for competition, a love for teamwork. The scheming, the Xing and Oing, and the minute details that can be separators down the road as you get to a higher level of competition. Those things can be sorted out later on. But the issue with the revolution needs to sort of devolve in some respects, and not be so obsessed with the accomplishments of the whole group right now. That is, sign up, get games, play in tournaments, fancy uniforms, and let's get the best team we can that can go ahead and win right now. But let's play the long game and say, let's teach, let's grow, let's develop, let's really emphasize those. I refer to them all the time in my coaching as, well, we're back to these boring fundamentals again. All this stuff. Hey, you want to talk about, well, why couldn't I make that pass last night under that level of pressure? Well, it's one of those boring fundamentals. It's not very flashy, and it's not very uh, it's not very impressive. It's just really depressive when you can't do it, right? So let's get back to those boring fundamentals. Hey, there's a footwork technique here that somebody along the way didn't, you didn't catch it, whether it wasn't emphasized or taught well enough, or you didn't practice it enough. It's a footwork problem. It is a positioning of your body problem. It is like in basketball, do the work a second or two prior to getting the ball that makes the difference. It's all those boring fundamentals that are just seemingly, those are the things that we push through, right? I mean, I did it with my oldest son was playing travel baseball, and you have one or two practices a week, and those sort of become, hey, get some ground balls, some fly balls, and everybody takes some hacks in batting practice, and we'll go play a tournament this week. And if everybody's, if our players are good enough, we'll win. If they're not, we won't. But is anybody building the core essentials that are necessary that go forward? Well, I'll look back on that and say, well, we probably didn't emphasize that quite enough. Those are the things that you let slide in the name of, well, we got a game and we got to play, and we got to get our team ready. But I would take the revolution and strip it back down and try to get back to in order to make the game more enjoyable for the students, for the student athletes, when they get into those middle school, high school years, which is, the extent of virtually all of their careers. Okay, in order to be more successful there, let's de-emphasize our ability to win right now as 9-year-olds as a group. But you might find that as you improve each individual in that group, that the actual group can play better anyway, and
Yeah,
that's more important.
yeah, Ed. I just think we have been in an era for some time where the emphasis has been on organized gameplay.
Absolutely, that's it. Get the best group you can together as quickly as you can, and turn them loose, because our tournament directors have a trophy on the line every weekend, and if we're going to pay money and go do this, we bringing home that trophy.
And our great friend Brad Burns, the outstanding head coach at Pleasure Ridge Park in Louisville, Kentucky, the man that has won 2 state championships as a player. He's won a state championship as a head coach, nearly won 2 in a row up there at PRP. But Brad, one of the finest coaches I've ever known, but certainly one of the finest coaches of young people. And when he was here in Murray with us, he liked to say he wanted a moratorium on all games prior to 12 years old.
Yeah.
And here's the thing that I want people to understand, because you mentioned competition earlier, and folks, please recognize that competition does need to be present at all times, and it can be present, but it does not have to be in the form of an organized game.
Right.
That's not required. If you are as old as Ed and I are, 53 here, 52 there, coming from the 20th century, we competed all the time in wiffle ball, in touch football, in pickup hoops, 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 3-on-3. And that's where true organic competition and competitive drive, I think, is built. Not because someone else is telling you, not because a coach is telling you to compete, but because you want to compete. You feel that way. You're enjoying that opportunity to compete and to learn. And of course, we all want to play. As Ed said, those fundamentals, boy, they're boring until you figure out that those fundamentals may be the thing that unlocks the best version of you. And boy, is there anything more fun than playing well? I don't think so. And you've said often, if you want to succeed, then be worthy of success.
Right.
Do the work that is required. And I think as parents, as coaches of young people, if we skip the steps required, because that's what we're doing. If we say, let's go play more games,
Right.
we are modeling for them. What are we telling them are important? More games.
Yep.
That should change if you want to develop better players.
I mean, I saw it happen as soon as I entered into high school basketball coaching in the 90s. The obsession with massive amounts of summer league basketball games became the norm. I mean, somewhere along the way, someone said, if some is good, more is better. And I've said that and seen that in a million different ways throughout the last 35 years. And we are all guilty of it to some degree. The assumption that if some is good, more is better. Why wouldn't we do these things? Well, because they are not benefiting us in the long run. Because the worst place to try to learn is within the realm of organized gameplay, with uniforms and coaches screaming and parents cheering and referees and umpires, the pressure environment that with a scoreboard, okay, something literally on the line. Those are not the places where the best learning takes place. The best learning takes place in sort of a manufactured version of that can also be relaxed to a learning environment.
Right.
But it's like, did you do your best learning? Did any student ever do their best learning on test day? during the test, did you say, oh, now I figured this out? Now that I'm taking this test, under the pressure of this test now, I can drum up the best version of Ed, the algebra student, and he's going to figure this out now. And of course, we know that that's not true. And we inherently know that is not true in developing student athletes, and yet we all fall victim to it. And that's the thing. Every week on here, every episode on here is true confessions, right? We all say, this is what we did. And I look back on it now and I say, now don't do as I did, do as I say. And that's the whole nature of it here, is that, yes, you want to learn to compete against the game itself. That's why that's the beauty of a sport like golf. You're competing against the game, the elements, the ball, but you can't even blame the opposition for being too good. That's
right. It can't be the umpire's fault either.
That's right. That's right. Nobody's defending you. Nobody's tackling you. Nobody's blocking your shot. But getting yourself in those situations where you learn to compete against the conditions, against the expectations of your coach, against the expectations you have for yourself, right? And then you take periodic tests just like a student would to see, okay, how am I shaping up? Okay, under pressure, I'm not there yet. Well, I don't need more tests. I need more teaching.
Right.
I need more tutoring. And this is that you see everything. Everybody just wants the grade at the end of the day, right? Just like in academics. Right. So often was just like, what would it take for me to get the grade?
I don't want the knowledge.
That's right. I didn't do well enough on the test, and it's the end of the grading term, and I asked the teacher, where's my extra credit? Can I do some extra credit? I'm like, well, the point was for you to have actually learned something. And we do this. I mean, that's essentially what we're doing in youth sports when we're not intentional about backing it down and trying to emphasize the steps in the process as opposed to the end results.
Ed, here's where I want to use an example, and we'll use summer basketball on a high school level here to illustrate why change doesn't happen as often as it should. So my wife, of course, spent 21 years as the head coach at Murray High School. So she was coaching through this explosion of June basketball in our state, 30 games in less than 30 days. Seems like a great idea, right?
Sure.
And because McCracken's doing it, Graves does it. Because Graves does it, Marshall does it. Because Marshall does it, Callaway does it. Because Callaway does it, Murray does it, so on and so forth. And you and I know, living on the inside with coaches, at every point in the latter stages of June, every coach hates it and complains about it. And we look at each other and say, well, then why don't you stop doing it?
Yep.
Well, I will if they will, or if they will, but I don't want to look bad if they're all going to do it and I'm not doing it.
Yep.
And that's the pressure. Going out and being a revolutionary, going out and being different, going out and being the coach and the program and the school that says, we're not going to do that to our kids and our families anymore. We're going to have some organized fundamental work. We're going to have some gym work where you can come in June and maybe after the dead period, some in July. But we're going to give you your lives back in large respects. But when we're here, we're going to do things that actually make each of us better, because what we know is going to happen if the team goes to compete in June, are you going to be giving the guy who's the worst ball handler chances to make plays, to initiate, to create, to learn how to be better? No. All the usage is going to go through your better players, right?
Right.
Sure. Because you need to, for some reason, you need to win that game on June 14th.
I mean, we really have to win that game, or at least, well, we feel like we have to because we scheduled it. So we're going to try to win it. And yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We will do silly things like practice 5 times, have, 10 dates across June where we play an average of 2.5 games a day, and we'll wonder why those 5 practices don't show up. Why we didn't see any, well, this kid didn't get any better this summer. Well, no kidding.
But he did get older.
That's right. And he came to everything that you had scheduled and organized. He didn't come to anything. You didn't have, you didn't have anything extra organized other than he showed up and he rode a bus and we sat around and played 2 or 3 games today. And he still does the exact same things wrong that he did last basketball season when you said he's got to get better, she's got to get better. But when is the window of opportunity? And it, we always put it back. Well, the kids got to want to do it themselves. Okay. Yes. True to some degree, but are we modeling that?
Right. That's what you emphasize.
Yeah. If the thing that seems most important is, well, coach, I can't be here for 2 of those practices at the start of the summer, but I can be at all the game days. And we say, sounds good. Because you're going to be one of our starters, so we just want to see you play against other teams and evaluate you against other teams. And so,
and here's what's crazy. And we're not bagging on basketball. Baseball's got plenty of its own baggage, but that's just like you are in the midst of a high school season. How many games have you guys played so far?
We've played 4 varsity games.
Okay. You played 4 varsity games. And you've been in official practice since at some point after October 15th, yes?
Yeah, right at October 15th.
Okay. So because you played all those games in June, did you guys ever consider going, hey, you know what? We'll just get started on December 1st. It'll be fine.
Right. Yeah, we never considered that we had stored up enough improvement in practice time that we'll just delay the start of our season and just pick it up with games, right?
Right.
No, that made no sense. And we've got this weird dynamic, in high school basketball in Kentucky where you can practice for 6 or 7 weeks before you can play an official game, right? But you can practice, our middle schools practice for about 6 or 7 minutes before they start playing games. And, then we got to cram those middle school games in there as quickly as we can and get as many of those played. And then voila, they will have ended their season. You might have played 18 games on your 8th grade team and you had 24 practices for the whole year.
Not exactly facilitating growth, are we?
Yeah, we're just like, well, who's good enough to play in a game already, right? Because, that's the nature of it. And it's unfortunate because I've started seeing that years ago. I said, well, the place that needs to have 6 weeks of uninterrupted practice before they play any games is down there.
Right. Everything's just clinic and camp, right? I mean, that's what it has to be.
That's what it needs to be. Everybody, we front load the schedule and it always ends, our middle school basketball schedule always ends by the 2nd or 3rd week in January. And so we front load it with games. Now they have trickled into October. Actual first games of the season are in October all the time now. And then November, December. And I'm like, well, actually, we should come back from fall break and start practicing and play our first games in January. And then we don't even have to play 18 or 20 of them. They don't have to have that many. Right. They need the fundamental practice time. But
we didn't when we were that age, correct?
That's right. I believe our 8th grade team played 12.
Yeah. And sometimes that was at least 3 too many.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
Well, and I think about when I came back to the high school level as a baseball coach, and of course you by then you already had a culture of kids who played age group travel baseball in the late spring through summer and in some cases even in the fall. And it's just play. And of course they got to me and my belief was, and of course, I'm not saying my 3-hour practices are a good idea. If I had it to do over again, we would change that. We would practice 2 hours at a time, 3 times a day. No, but what I recognize when I look at our guys, and you see fundamentally you're not good enough. Your ability to run bunt coverages is not good enough. Your ability to run relays, it's not good enough. Your first and thirds are not good enough. Your ability to handle the bat, bunt the baseball, hit and run, base run, it's not good enough. Holding runners, controlling the running game, it's not good enough. And so what do you need to do? You need to pour in, pour in, pour in. But what you find, the kids look at you like you're crazy because they're like, I already know how to play baseball. I've played a million games.
Yeah. Yeah. I
What's the
mean,
deal?
I know. And you say yes, but while it might have been some version of successful, eventually it reaches a breaking point. Because the game will demand your fundamental, uh, your fundamentals will have to rise to the occasion, and it will, if you play long enough and you play enough of the right kinds of competition, it will eventually tell on you if you don't have the continued fundamental growth, if you didn't have those essential fundamentals, because the game pressure, that's the thing everybody needs to understand from the start is whatever anybody's capability is, whatever that lid is, you can pull that lid down some on everybody because game pressure will decrease some of your performance ability just
Right.
simply by the fact that you are under the strain. Now, more kids, some kids feel it much worse than others. And so, this is not necessary. This gets used in sports all the time, but you don't rise to the occasion, right? You fall to the level of your preparation. And when we have failed to prepare, we're setting kids up for failure. Then
Right.
suddenly the lack of fundamentals get exposed, whether it happens to you in seventh grade, eighth grade, ninth grade, 10th grade, varsity. Eventually, if you don't have the fundamental wherewithal to accomplish the basics that are necessary, then you get exposed. And if there's nobody else around you that can outperform you, and you're out there and you've just got to continue to wear it, and then we're not setting kids up to be the best they can be.
And that's our job ultimately. I mean, that's, you want to talk about a coach them up concept. That is it. And that's where, we hope young coaches will understand and look, neither Ed nor I are foolish, and we're both competitive. We know how important winning can be. Everybody wants to, certainly. I think eventually you have to be wise enough to understand that everybody can't. Two teams meet, two coaches meet, one's walking away a winner, the other one's not. But maxing out your players, maxing out your group, that's the job. If you don't have enough talent, you don't, and you can't do very much about that. But you can make people the best they can be. And again, as Ed, kind of our buzz phrase here is what you emphasize. The idea of ministering to the players in the way that helps them become the best versions of themselves. Again, the talent that you have as a collective versus how much talent's on the other side, that's going to determine outcome. And there's very little that will change that, but you can change the mastery level and what you're giving your kids. And that's important. And obviously this is something we could talk about forever, but I'm going to split it here, Ed, as we go toward the finish line. You're at a point now, I think, in your career, you and I both have to acknowledge that we are in autumn of both life and career, if not winter. It feels like winter up here on top of my head, but being at this stage in coaching, I think is freeing. It's liberating in a lot of ways. You are able now, I think, to embrace doing things differently, not just in terms of coaching guys up, but also in terms of schemes, things that you might try to do that might look radically different than traditional ways of solving a problem in game competition. What has allowed you to be more comfortable of going out on a limb and to not worry about that people might say that guy's a wacko?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I'm necessarily that comfortable with it, other than I just simply say, uh, experience has taught me that uh, you you cannot just assume that you already knew the best way to accomplish it, and that it has to be this way no matter what. Now, there are certain non-negotiables that it's what makes a good coach a good coach. The standard is the standard and things of that nature. But in terms of, how you actually go about it, you've got to evaluate your talent, and you've got to say, based on what we have, what we can do, what our ceiling and limits are, and what our floor is, then what will give us the best opportunity to accomplish the most that we could possibly accomplish. Because I have to eliminate what everybody else, in terms of the other teams. We have to eliminate what they can do. I cannot control that. I
Right.
have no ability to control that, other than how I prepare our guys to be able to impact them on the day that we are between the lines with them. But in terms of what they have and how they play and what they do, that's inconsequential. Uh, this is who, you just have to be willing to embrace some changes. And there's some aspects of that I'm much more embracing of as time has gone on. I've just tried to always keep an open mind and say there's not just one way to do everything. And frankly, in adjusting with the changes generationally, it kind of needs to be that way. It kind of needs to be that way. We've laughed in our previous episodes about, the way we grew up with the coaches and the mentors above us that, were, baby boomer generation. And so whatever somebody said, you just did it, and it was following orders. And now there's a bit more of a partnership involved, right? There's a finding a way uh, to find and bring out the best, and it's not by constant harping and berating them, but it is finding, uh, where what buttons can be pushed in an appropriate manner that unlocks a few things that allow someone to play with freedom, right? And so
Right.
I've been part of coaching staffs, and we've sort of micromanaged everything, and we taught our players to function in that way. And now I've you know I've sort of revolutionized a bit, and I say, you've got to cut them loose and let them play with freedom, and there'll be a certain amount of control that you have to give away. Um, but in the end, ultimately, you hope that your players take greater ownership in what they're doing, and that is perhaps a better thing to prepare them for life, right?
Well, it is, Ed, and I want to go back, and this will not be so much about, radical plans in terms of schemes and doing things different in terms of gameplay, but I'm going to take it back to this idea of there's nothing new under the sun and how things cycle off of what you just talked about. Now, one of the things that was interesting about our era, and our coaches were the way that they were, but that was also an era where the basketball coach had been on the football staff and was going to be on the baseball staff. And when school ended in late spring, he was going to see you around the ballpark in town, but you weren't coming to any of his practices, and neither was he. We'll see you when we get going for football in the fall or whatever. And our coaches were leaders of men, but in many ways, they were chaperones of players, because just like we've engineered a generation of professional players from 8 or 9 years old, we've become professional coaches in terms of how much time we spend studying our craft and preparing what we do. Look, I'm not going to say that years ago every coach was just rolling the balls out, but because of what their schedules were and what their other responsibilities were, there was a little of that. And there sure was a whole lot of, hey, figure it out. And so I do think we got to come up learning to be more instinctive and more self-reliant as ball players because the micromanaging was not there. There wasn't enough of a staff there because the head coach had an assistant who would be there when he got done being the head football coach.
Right.
And it was just a different situation. And so what you're talking about is absolutely real. And I do think it's a good thing and a revolutionary thing in a way if it cycles back to giving our players more freedom to figure it out, to find their way.
Right. I mean, you really ultimately you're trying to pour into them to empower them to take ownership of their own performance, and thus then you'd like to see them collectively come together and own the, have a collective ownership of the performance of the group under the tutelage, under the instruction, under the mentorship and guidance of someone that's been there and has some wisdom, but without it being a controlling thing. Because again, you're trying to develop young people, you know, who aren't just good young players or good young, you're trying to develop them to become good adults as well, right? So we have to try to look beyond that and say, okay, there's the ultimate mission is, revolutionary. Let's not leave these kids in a position to have everything dictated to them, right? They should be able to take ownership and grow and move forward and take accountability and all those things that are necessary. And I think that actually is a missing element sometimes, and we would do well to get back to it at a greater emphasis.
Yeah, because you and I mean, one of the things that we've talked a lot about over the last several years is the concern of where are the leaders, especially among young men. And when you have cleared every obstacle and you put every bit of input in, you pushed every button, that removes the ability for people to lead. At,
Right.
at, at some point, you have to leave them to their own device and figure out how to do that. We have just had, and it was a terrible habit of mine. As soon as it was clear to me that there was an absence of player-driven leadership in the team, I was going to take the wheel. I was going to enforce that, and I was going to just put my stamp on it because I refused to let it be anything else. Rather than take the chance that they wouldn't figure it out, I also robbed them of the ability to figure it out.
Right. Yeah, and we've got to. Yeah, that's the thing is if they didn't figure it out, they need to be allowed to fail, but with
Right.
the but within the guardrails of, hey, somebody's watching. They're not going to just let you burn the whole house down, but they need to be allowed to fail. That's part of the whole learning process, and that's a whole nother episode where we have this the need to perform with people watching has made it where kids are often afraid to attempt things that they're not good at, so they won't even practice something that they would fail at. They run from it. Kids that can't dribble with their weak hand, they will do everything in practice to avoid using that hand in practice. And I'm like, well, if you're going to kick it into the bleachers, this is as good a time as any, not during the game,
Right. Do it
right?
today.
Give permission to fail, right? That's part of the growth process. But when we get so results driven as coaches and parents, now they're not even allowed to fail, right? And they live under that pressure, and that doesn't actually produce the best for them, um, athletically or emotionally.
Well, and as we head toward the finish line here, Ed, because again, we're touching into some other things that can be in entire other episodes for us, but and what I'm going to share certainly will be uh, part of an episode. We've already kind of had some of these conversations, but want to remind parents in particular, and I guess also remind coaches um, how short our window is with players. The window really is relative to life. It really is a short window. If the kid starts playing at 4 or 5 years old, kid plays through college, they're going to be 22. or in today's world, 27. Who knows? We have extra years now. But ballpark, you're talking about a 15, 16, 17, 18-year window at most. Then if you're a middle school coach, you might have a kid for 2 or 3 years, a high school kid, 4 years, whatever. And just want people to be sure they are always remembering why we're doing what we're doing, what the benefit ultimately is. As you know, my son, who has been deeply invested in sports, especially the game of baseball, since he was 4 or 5 years old, he recently made the decision to end his playing career to pursue coaching. God bless him. See, these kids ever pay attention to us, Ed?
He probably been listening to the podcast.
He must have. Hopefully, we'll help him do better than we did. But at 21 years old, and after, as I've said so many times, he's probably taken more swings than anyone that ever lived in our community. You've been there for it. That's probably true, right?
Yeah.
But then at some point, it comes to an end. And so I would just want parents, especially, to remember. First of all, enjoy the ride. There's a revolutionary topic. It would have been for me to enjoy every moment and to understand that whatever the end result is, it needs to be about something more than batting averages, RBIs, points scored, rebound. If we are in the ministry business with our children, with our players, just remember again what we're emphasizing, what we're modeling. It's so critical, and it comes to a halt at some point. And hopefully, we're creating young men and young women who, through their playing careers, the lessons they learn, they will be coached up as they begin to model for and mold the next generation.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, ultimately, when we can keep our perspective, we know that we're not just trying to raise good little athletes or good little, student athletes. We're trying to, ultimately, our goal is to have raised or have impacted or coached or influenced good people, good adults who learned a lot of brilliant life lessons along the journey that sports can provide. But it is revolutionary sometimes to break it back down and say, okay, it is the person and it is the long term goal, because all the rest of this is all just very, very temporary.
Very much so. And if your player is as talented as LeBron James or Shohei Ohtani, that tends to take care of itself.
That's true.
But our job is to coach everybody, even if physically, in terms of talent, they don't have very much. The value of this, of sports, of the community, the team experience can be so great, regardless of the physical wherewithal and where that goes. And perspective is easy to come by when you're done. Perspective is easier to come by when you're old. But for everybody in the heat of the moment, we needed coaching up, and I don't think that'll ever change. And so that's the value of having the resources in your life and somebody with the wisdom to say, hey, emphasize this, model this. Don't worry about that. Winning is great, but it ain't everything, and it don't last forever.
That's right. That's right.
All right, my friend. Hey, make sure that you're making notes every time you say this is an episode and this is an episode. Make sure you list that, because we got to find our song title, right? We got to be ready for the next time out. So
True.
we appreciate you. I know you've got other things to get to, so we will wrap it up here. But thanks for being with us. You're a revolutionary figure, my friend.
Right. Well, me and George Washington.
That's right. Guys, we'll see you next time here on Coach 'em Up.